What's the best part of watching a sport? Maybe it's watching a close game, or maybe it's rooting for your home team. However, as much as I love those things, my favorite thing about watching sports is the rivalries, and it is no different with Super Smash Bros. Melee. Sure, you got rivalries like Cody Schwab versus Zayn, or Mango versus Hungrybox, and those are great, but I want to focus on one of, if not the best rivalry in my home tournament series, 4Stocked. Greg versus Stocky. These two players, a Jigglypuff and Sheik player respectively, dominated the first season, with both of them winning a third of all tournaments that season. Just to put this in perspective, since there are 12 tournaments in a season, and since both Stocky and Greg won 4 tournaments in Season 1, that means they won 8 tournaments combined, and only 4 tournaments were won by different people. You could even make the argument that Stocky and Greg could have won way more, because before Stocky was skill banned, he was on a roll, and with Stocky gone, nobody could really stop Greg. In this video, I'm going to go over the sets they played in detail, and hopefully, I can show you how insane this rivalry truly was. The first time these two met was at 4Stocked number 1, where they would play 2 sets against each other. The first set would be pretty far in bracket, being played in winners finals. But before we get into the games, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps a lot. Anyways, with all that said, let's look into the games. The first game would be played on Fountain of Dreams, where Greg would 2-stock Stocky and take the game with a rollout, aka neutral beat. The second game would be played on Pokemon Stadium, where Stocky would close it out with a down tilt into a fair. Game 3 would take place on Battlefield, where Greg would 2-stock Stocky again, taking the game with a rest. And finally, Game 4 would take place on Fountain of Dreams. It was a very back and forth game, but Greg would eventually make a small comeback and take the set 3-1 over Stocky. Honestly, even though Stocky lost that set, I still think it showed something, especially since up till this point, nobody had taken a game off of Greg in bracket. So with Stocky not only making it close, but taking a game off of him, already put him above most people there. But it wouldn't end there, because Stocky emerged from losers to face Greg once again in grand finals. I'll also say once again, let's get into the games. The first game would take place on Dreamland, which is odd because Stocky could have banned it because that stage is really good for Puff. But none of that would even matter because Stocky would 2-stock Greg, taking the first game in grand finals. The second game would take place on Battlefield, where Stocky would take the match once again with a missed rest punish. Now, Stocky's up 2-0 and only needs one more game to win the set, pushing into a bracket reset. So Greg would have to lock in if he wanted to win this set. Greg ran it back to Battlefield for Game 3, where he would start to play more aggressively, and this would lead to him taking the game with another 2-stock. Game 4 would be played on Fountain of Dreams, where Stocky would SD last stock, and Greg would 3-stock him, making the count 2-2. Now, we were at the last game of the set. If Stocky won this last game, the bracket would reset, and if he won the next set, he would win the entire tournament. However, all Greg would have to do to win is win this last match, and as fate would have it, he did.
He's taken so much percent, and there's 2 full stock. That is gonna do it.
Wow. Very close. Almost gets the bracket reset.
Takes it to game 5, but couldn't quite close it. Congrats to Greg for...
Even though Stocky lost both sets, remember, he was the only one to even take a game off of Greg in bracket. It proved that Stocky wasn't just an opponent for Greg, but a match for him as well. Now, these two wouldn't meet again until 4Stocked number 4, because of Greg's absences from 4Stock 2 and 4Stock 3, and because of Stocky's absence from 4Stock number 2. They would only play one set in this tournament, in winners finals. And so for the 100th time I say, let's get into the games. Game 1 would take place on Dreamland, with Stocky convincingly taking it with the 2-stock. Game 2 would take place on Battlefield, where with some good punishes and some good edge guards, Greg would take Game 2 with the 2-stock. Game 3 would take place on Pokemon Stadium, and even with more great punishes, Greg would win with another 2-stock. Game 4 would take place on Battlefield, where we would have our first close game of the set, and Stocky would take it with a deep edge guard, taking it to Game 5. Game 5 would take place on Fountain of Dreams, where Stocky would win with a fair, winning the set. After this, Greg would go into Losers Finals, and since this is a Greg vs. Stocky video, and not a Greg vs. Tortellini video, as boring as that would be, with all due respect, I will just briefly mention that Greg would lose 3-0. And in Grand Finals, Stocky would go against Tortellini and win in Grand Finals reset, securing his first 4-stock win. This win would be great for Stocky, because in both of the 4-stocks he had played before, he would get second. But now, he had finally won his first 4-stock. But that would definitely not be his last. After 4-stock number 4, they would meet up again at the tournament immediately after that, 4-stock number 5. Here, they would play only one set. Let's see how that went. Oh. Yeah, this didn't go too well, but unfortunately, this set wasn't streamed, and I tried to get the replays from both Greg and Stocky, but it seems that neither of them have them, so I apologize for not having any gameplay of the set. But even with that problem, nothing can stop me from getting to the games. The first game would take place on Battlefield, where Greg would take it. Just like Game 1, Greg would take Game 2, but on Dreamland. Then after this, Stocky would begin his losers run until he was beaten by Kutino and ended up getting 5th, while Greg would end up taking the entire tournament getting 1st. Now, this didn't look too good for Stocky. Not only would this be the first time Greg would beat him without losing a match, but it would be the first time where Stocky wouldn't even make it into Grands. So when all this happened, it seemed like we were back at square one. After 4-stock number 5 happened, 4-stock number 6 would come, and mark the halfway point for the season. Here, Stocky and Greg would play 3 sets against each other, starting in winter semifinals. So with that being said, let's get into the games. Game 1 would take place on Battlefield, where Stocky would take Greg to last stock and win with a fair. Game 2 would coincidentally be exactly like Game 1, because they would both go to last stock, and Stocky would take the game with a fair, winning the set 2-0 over Greg. After that, they would face each other again in Grand Finals. So once again, I'll say, let's get into the games. Game 1 would take place on Dreamland, where Greg would make some strange rest decisions, where Stocky would be able to take it with a ledge grab, and would end up 2-stocking it. Game 2 would take place on Battlefield, where Greg would start to get his rest game back in order, and put himself on the board. Game 3 would take place on Fountain of Dreams, where Stocky would start to make a comeback to get Greg to his last stop, when it wouldn't be enough, because Greg would end up winning the match. Game 4 would take place on Pokemon Stadium, and Stocky would take Greg to last stock, but it wouldn't be enough to stop Greg from winning the match, and taking the set. After this, they would play in Grand Finals reset. The first game would be played on Battlefield, where Stocky would once again take Greg to last stock, but end up missing his ledge dash, leading to Greg taking the match. Game 2 would take place on Dreamland, where Greg would take it with a 2-stock because of Stocky's missed ledge dash again. For Game 3, Stocky would opt to go Dreamland again, but Greg would 2-stock Stocky and end up winning the tournament. Now, to conclude the first half of the season, Greg would win about 71% of the sets and 64% of the matches. By the way, just want to mention that while these two would meet at 4Stocked number 7, they wouldn't run into each other, and they wouldn't face each other at all in this tournament. Well, at least according to my research. So I just wanted to mention that before we moved on to 4Stocked number 8. Now, this would be the first tournament in the second half of the season where they would face each other. Here, they would play only one set against each other, in grand finals. So, as always, let's get into the games. Game 1 would take place on Battlefield, where it would go to last stock, and Stocky would end up taking it with a down tilt into a fair. For Game 2, they would go back to Battlefield, where Stocky would get some good missed rest punishes, but Greg would return the favor by landing a couple of rests, winning the match. Stocky would take Greg to Dreamland for Game 3, where Greg would miss many rests, allowing Stocky to get the punishes that he needed in order to win the game. Then, for Game 4, Greg would end up choosing Fountain of Dreams, but he would end up rage quitting after not making it back to stage. So now, it seems that Greg would start to have the tables turned on him. Stocky number 9 would end up being the last time these two would play against each other in Season 1. Here, they would place 3 sets, starting in winners' finals. So, for the last time in the video, I'll say, let's get into the games. Game 1 would take place on Battlefield, where Greg would take it with the rest punish. For Game 2, we would see Stocky pick Dreamland, where Greg would still end up winning the match. And Game 3 would go to Yoshi's Story, where Greg would narrowly take it, winning the set and sending Stocky to losers. Then, they would meet back up at Grand Finals, after Stocky would win a close set against Vamper B1. Game 1 would start on Battlefield, where Stocky would strongly take the match, 3-stocking Greg. For Game 2, Greg would go back to Battlefield, but Stocky would win with a down tilt into an up air. And Game 3 would go to Battlefield again, and Stocky would end up taking it with a down throw into an up air. So now, Stocky has 3-0'd Greg, just as Greg had 3-0'd him in winners finals, and they would play in the last set of the whole tournament, Grand Finals Reset. The first game would take place on Battlefield, where Stocky would get a strong start to the set with a 3-stock win over Greg. Game 2 would go to Dreamland, where Greg would end up quitting out of the game, giving Stocky Game 2. For Game 3, Greg would opt to go to Yoshi's Story, where with some good rests and edge guards, Greg would end up putting himself on the board, taking Game 3. Game 4 would be on Fountain of Dreams, where Stocky would end up S-ing an early stock, allowing Greg to win the match. Now, the last game of the set would go to Yoshi's Story. No matter who won, this would be their last set with each other. So this game could possibly define their entire rivalry. If they wanted to prove themselves, they would have to give it their all. Would Greg take it over Stocky, like he had done many other times before? Or would Stocky finally win after having such a rough past against Greg? Well, that question will be answered with just one moment.
No more.
And for this stock, he just needs to take a stock off of Ariel's.
Yeah.
And Stocky is committing to the
Oh,
not
God.
laser camping, the needle camping.
Gets a. Oh, gets the up tilt. Couple bears.
Oh,
Reads the roll and up air.
Yep. All right. Oh, that was a good.
After winning the tournament, Stocky would get skill banned from 4Stocked, and Greg right after would play in 4Stocked number 10, where he would get his 4th win, also getting skill banned. I think that this is great, because just like Greg said when I interviewed him for 4Stocked number 10, I was kind of Stocky's competition. If I didn't graduate right after, that would kind of invalidate me. A decent time after this, they would both compete in 4Stocked Invitational number 1. But just like 4Stocked number 7, they wouldn't run into each other. Thus being the last time, as of right now, that they would play in a 4Stocked tournament. To summarize this video, I'm going to say what each tournament symbolized for their rivalry. To start, 4Stocked number 1 showed Greg's dominance in the beginning, but showed that Stocky still had a chance. 4Stocked number 4 showed that despite Greg beating him twice in the last tournament, Stocky could still definitely win. In 4Stocked number 5, it wouldn't show much, but I guess it would show how quickly these two could mess with each other's bracket run. And 4Stocked number 6 would show that both could win, but Greg would just have a slightly better chance in the beginning. 4Stocked number 8 would be the first time Stocky would take grands over Greg, and it would begin Stocky's dominance in the second half. 4Stocked number 9 would end their rivalry, where Stocky would put aside his losses and end up taking it over Greg. In conclusion, while I can't fully determine who won, I am sure about one thing: that these two players left their mark in 4Stocked history forever. Thanks for watching. Hey, CT271 here. Just wanted to say thank you for watching this video, because I put a lot of work into it. In fact, the How I Won My First Tournament video only took a week. This took me slightly more than a week to make, so I hope you enjoy it. Also, I plan on making more Best Rivalry of 4Stocked Seasons videos, like about Season 2 and Season 3. So stay tuned for those. And also, tell me what you think. Who won this rivalry? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, like always, until next time.